Hi everyone, thank you for joining me once again. Today we're going to talk about one of the most ancient symbols in Jewish mysticism that we can find in many dual meanings, in many stories, and we can find on amulets till this day. We're going to talk about the serpent. The serpent, or the snake, is a very ancient symbol that we can meet in the story of the Garden of Eden in Genesis. We find it there as a snake on the tree of knowledge that is actually luring people to taste from the fruit of those trees, and this is how it causes them to commit sins, which will eventually lead them to be cast away from the Garden of Eden. But we find ancient snakes and ancient serpents in many creation stories in different mythologies. For example, in ancient Greece, we have a beautiful story of Gaia dancing with a serpent. Their dance is actually the dance which is creating the world. It's the birth of the world. And perhaps the serpent is also there as a symbol which has phallic meaning, male and female, so they're creating the world. We can find it in India and in the First Nations in the Americas. We find many serpents whenever we meet the story of creating the world. In Egypt, we find a hymn for Isis that she's actually giving us a cure of how to fight the biting of the serpents. In Mesopotamia, we have Tiamat. Tiamat is an ancient goddess, some kind of a primordial water. The water is being created from them, many times because a male deity is fighting Tiamat, and he is bringing the world out of her body almost as giving birth. And in this ancient water, you find creatures, mysterious creatures, sometimes in the shape of serpents or even dragons. Tiamat herself is sometimes being portrayed as an ancient snake, a gigantic snake, a serpent, a dragon. Anat, the goddess of war, the Canaanite goddess of war, is fighting those creatures when she wants to help Baal become the ruler of the pantheon of the gods. In these stories, there are the monsters who's helping the sea god to fight his wars. She's fighting them and she's winning, but she has to fight them so Baal could become king of the gods. Even in the Bible, we find descriptions of God fighting those creatures or creating them. So they answer to him. In later Jewish mysticism, we even find descriptions of angelic beings in the shape of serpents, burning serpents with wings, seraphims, not all of them, but some of them. When we talked about the goddess of fertility, we said that the fact that the serpent, the snake, was shedding its skin in the ancient world made people observe it as a symbol of rebirth, renewal, healing, and fertility. And it is connected to many ancient goddesses. When we are being removed from the Garden of Eden, from the trees of life that were a symbol of the goddess and the serpent, we're actually being removed from the holy garden of the goddess. This is how the ancient writers wanted to fight the idea that we're still worshipping goddess of fertility or different goddesses in the ancient world and wanted to bring us close to only one god. Serpents are maintaining many ancient meanings, sometimes dual meanings. For example, during the Exodus, when people are committing sins against God, He's sending snakes to bite them. They're crying out, Moses is praying to God, and the God is telling Moses, create this copper serpent, put it on your staff, and whenever the people that were bitten by those snakes would look at the serpent, they would be healed. Later monotheistic faiths are struggling with this story. They come up with a lot of explanations that if you look at the serpent, then you actually carry your eyes to the sky and God is in the sky, so you actually knowing that God is responsible for your healing and you're being healed. So they're trying to come up with a lot of explanations instead of just admitting that this is preserving the very ancient meanings of a serpent as a symbol of healing and rebirth. We know that later on, someone in the temple would be breaking this copper serpent along with other mysterious items that maybe were connected to ancient divinities, but they wanted the people to step away from them and get close to the one God. There is a story in the Zohar, the famous Kabbalah book, about the Shekinah, the feminine side or manifestation of the divine in Jewish mysticism. And she is traveling in the tree of life between the heavens. And she travels there in the form of a gazelle. And she is pregnant, and it's time for her to give birth. And she is crying out because she's struggling with the birth. And God is sending the serpent, an ancient serpent, maybe the same serpent from the Garden of Eden, to help her while she's giving birth. I'm sorry for the graphic description that I'm about to give here, but what the serpent is doing is biting her in the place where she is supposed to give birth from, and at the beginning comes out blood, the blood of the birth, and then fluids. And from the sky they actually fall down onto the ground and make it fertile. It is very similar to fertility stories that we know from ancient times. There's an ancient synagogue in the north part of Israel where you can find the head of Medusa. Medusa migrated here with the Hellenic, with the Greek, and later on the Roman stories. Medusa is the woman that, instead of hair, she has serpents, and if you look at her, into her eyes, you're turning into stone. Why do you find such a menacing monster on the side of a synagogue where you pray? Sometimes I would take a mythological monster and actually would put her on a place in which I wish to be protected. So now she would be on my side and scare away maybe people or even spirits that shouldn't be there. I'm actually taking the ancient symbol, even if I find it scary, and now I use it as a symbol of protection. Even in modern amulets or talismans, you can find the symbol of the serpent. In the Jewish world, you can find it on these silver plates that you used to place on Torah books, on the holy books. You can see two pillars that maybe symbolize the entrance to the temple or even the synagogue, and you can see two giant serpents that are actually crawling and climbing on them. Why do you find serpents on snakes on something that is so holy in a synagogue? Maybe because they knew, or they took the idea from Jewish mysticism, that a serpent has many layers. It's neither good or bad, it is everything, it is complicated. And here maybe it is a symbol of protection. Also, the symbol of Dan, the tribe, one of the 12 tribes, was a serpent, and you find it on paintings on walls in synagogues. In amulets in Morocco, you can find serpents that were meant either to protect the house or the child. In some of them, you can even see the serpent, the snake, shedding its skin. Maybe it was a protection for the child to scare away evil spirits or from the house. And maybe it was also an amulet, a talisman of renewal, of rebirth, to make sure that the child or everyone in the house are staying healthy. In Middle Ages, we will see that the serpent is becoming a symbol of mythological women that are a bit more complicated, like Lilith, and we will talk about her in many videos later on. New Age spiritual beliefs today are taking those connections and are trying to bring the serpent to its worthy place in the spiritual world. They're doing it with the help of many stories they bring from the East and from the West, and digging into ancient manuscripts. What do you think about snakes and serpents? I'm very intrigued to hear it. Do you have maybe some kind of jewelry or an amulet going through the family that has a snake on it? If you do, let me know. Serpents, snakes are fascinating. I encourage you to go and learn about them. Of course, don't do any weird, irresponsible things like going into nature and trying to pet them, especially if you're not qualified to work with them and don't know what you're doing. But they are fascinating. So, dig into the symbol, see where it meets you, and I will see you next time.